a black and white image of Amelia Earhart, the model would add color to that in, matter of seconds. But then there were all of these kind of human edits that I wanted to do that wasn't just like add color to this, but let's change the color of her accessories and things like that. So I did that in Photoshop, and that's when I kind of experienced the combination of machine learning and of human creativity combined.
Interesting.
And I thought that was very inspiring, and it made me think about how powerful that technology was, but also how inaccessible it was, because someone couldn't just go and do that at the time.
Welcome to Triangle Tweener Talks, a weekly podcast by builders for builders where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from the Triangle region of North Carolina. Tweener Talks is produced by Earfluence. Now here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the Triangle Tweener Fund, Scott Wingo.
Welcome to this episode of the Triangle Tweener Talks podcast, a discussion with Bristles founder Tina Tang. First, special thanks to our friends at Earfluence who produced this podcast. If you're thinking about hosting a podcast or want to be a guest on a podcast, check out Earfluence at earfluence.com. This episode is sponsored by Robinson Bradshaw, a full-service business law firm with a passion for supporting the Triangle entrepreneurial ecosystem. Learn more about Robinson Bradshaw's startups and venture capital practice at robinsonbradshaw.com. And Smashing Boxes, a Durham-based lean, design-centric digital transformation company at smashingboxes.com. In this episode, we feature a first-time founder who is working her way through product market fit. Tina is the daughter of two U.S. immigrants who ended up in the Triangle thanks to her husband coming to attend Duke. Tina got her master's from UVA in systems engineering, where she focused on learning about the exploding field of AI and machine learning. At Bristles, Tina is able to merge her love of technology and math with her creative side. She's also enjoying one of my favorite product market fit strategies, going small to go big. Hey, Tina, thanks for coming in for the podcast.
Hey, Scott. Good to see you. I'm
you
excited.
As well. Yeah. I'm excited to hear your backstory. And we were discussing before we went live that we've recorded a lot of serial entrepreneurs, and you're a first-time entrepreneur, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of in the thick of what we would call the product market fit journey. So excited to dig into how that's going and all the things you've learned there and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Before we jump into that, let's start at the beginning. Where are you from?
So I grew up in Maryland and Virginia. So Northern Virginia, Alexandria, and went to school there and didn't get to North Carolina till 2016. But yeah, that's where I'm from.
Yeah. And then were your parents part of the DC Beltway bandit kind of thing? A lot of people that live there are tied into the government in some way.
No. So I'll tell a little bit of backstory about where my parents are from. So my dad is a refugee from the Vietnam War. So he immigrated to the U.S. in the late 70s. And my mom is from a farming village in rural China. So they grew up farming silkworms. So their story is they both are from kind of Cantonese-speaking places. So even though they're from different countries, they spoke the same language, Cantonese. And when they got to the States, for my dad, it was a super harrowing journey from Vietnam. He had
last helicopters out, kind of. Yeah, that was crazy seeing a lot of the footage from that era. Yeah.
Yeah, he immigrated to the U.S. So he escaped Vietnam from on a boat. So at the time, he was in his late teens working at a pen factory and saving up money. It was really expensive to get a ticket on one of these boats to escape Vietnam. So my dad saved up months, like close to a year of salary. And at the time, there were a lot of people trying to get out of Vietnam. So there were a lot of scammers. So you could buy a ticket and there could not be a boat the next day. And that happened to him the first time.
Holy cow.
So he saved up months of salary and bought a ticket to the boat. And there was no boat the next morning. So that was devastating. He had to kind of save up all over again, but really wanted to get to the US. So he saved up again. And the second time there was a boat. So he made it to the US and got to eventually. So got on a boat, went to Malaysia, worked at they kind of have these camps there that refugees can work at, and it's a safe place for them to stay until they can find a way to the U.S. And so eventually he got from the U.S. to, or from Malaysia to the U.S. and got to New York and hitchhiked his way to Maryland to meet up with his brother.
So his brother was there.
Yeah.
Is that like the classic coming through Staten Island or Ellis Island kind of a, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
And so he, at that time, didn't have any job prospects, didn't know the language. And so he ended up working at a Chinese restaurant where they spoke Cantonese. And that's where he met my mom, who was also working there.
Oh, wow, cool. And then what brought your mom here?
Also just trying to find a way to live an easier life. So she's from a very poor village in China where they didn't even have running water.
Is it in the north or south? Or?
In the south.
Yeah.
It's called Toisan. They both have similar stories, wanted to come to the U.S. to find a way to, live easier lives. And so when they got here, they were both kind of in survival mode, just trying to find a way to get a job. And they had dreams of, the American dream of saving up, letting their kids have good educations. They didn't have access to educations where they were from. My dad, because of the Vietnam War, they shut down the schools when he was in 5th grade. And then my mom also didn't have access to a good education. And so...
Just probably when she was very young, got put onto the silkworm farm. Yeah, I imagine, yeah.
So when they both got to the States, they both had dreams of starting a family here and giving me and my brother more opportunity. And they had a dream of, buying a house. So it was very humble dream.
That's the American dream.
Yeah. And they were very good at making the most of what they had. So they didn't have a lot, but they were really good at saving. And so eventually did buy a house, and me and my brother were able to have, great educations here and lived out what they wanted for us.
Yeah, my founder in my first 2 businesses was a first generation, immigrant, born in the U.S. kind of thing, but his parents were from Lithuania, and every one of his siblings, they're just like, the work ethic is just amazing. Like it's just they totally got that from the parents and understand how the American dream works, and all the work hard, make a life for yourself. So you're in Maryland and Virginia. Where did you go to undergrad?
So I ended up going to UVA for undergrad. It's kind of like the UNC of Virginia.
Yeah, you're a Cavalier.
Yes.
Or a Wahoo.
Both.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what'd you study?
So at the time, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was kind of interested in everything. I liked art. I liked writing. I liked math. I liked science. And I think, particularly good at math and science. So I thought I'd go into engineering, ended up majoring in civil engineering. And out of college, I worked for a civil engineering consulting firm for about a year, kind of decided that wasn't for me, and switched to IT consulting at Accenture.
Yeah. And then in civil engineering, did you like the infrastructure part or more like the airport? So you can kind of do like roads, bridges, airports. There's like a lot of different transportation, like a rail. Was there a particular thing in there that interested you?
I like the data analytics side of the field. So I did research in stormwater management and transportation engineering, kind of like capacity analysis and figuring out where you need animal crossings on roads. Like I did a bunch of kind of random things.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the data analytics side of it. And when I was working in civil engineering consulting, the area I was in was called Intelligent Transportation Systems. So it's kind of like all the sensors along the highway and how they alert like ramp meters and things like that, if you're familiar. So like if there's a automated ramp meter system, kind of when the bar goes up and lets cars onto
Metering
the highway.
cars in and how.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did that. Then you decided you had a passion for IT. Did you learn how to program in your engineering program a little bit? Like you did they have it where you had to take a little bit of a basic programming type?
We did. We had to take basic programming courses in Java and C. So I had basic knowledge. I didn't consider myself good at programming in.
So you had the intros,
yeah, but good problem solving skills, I would say.
Yeah. So then you're at Accenture, and then what kind of projects did you work on there?
So I switched into IT consulting at Accenture and started working out of their DC office. And initially my roles were kind of on the functional side, wrote a lot of SQL queries to analyze reports, lived in Excel and version 1, which is like Jira, but a different version of Jira.
Like a ticket tracking system kind of.
Yeah. So the system I was working in was a invoicing system for FedEx. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Did you get to go to Memphis and meet FedEx a lot?
No. So we worked out of the USPS office in DC where I was on the client site.
Okay. And then what else did you do? I know ultimately you're going to go back to UVA for a master's. What happened? Kind of what else happened inside of there?
So I met my now husband at Accenture. We actually interviewed on the same day, which was funny looking back. I'll tell a little bit about Anthony's backstory because it kind of
it's gonna
comes into play here. So Anthony did his undergrad in biomedical engineering at Johns Hopkins. And he was working with very early neural nets. After his undergrad, he was kind of set on going to start his master's at Columbia in New York, focused on theoretical neuroscience. But, he had just had this private school education in undergrad at Johns Hopkins, and his parents were really concerned about finances. The master's at Columbia would have been expensive, coupled with, living in New York City was very expensive. So they were kind of trying to encourage him to think about maybe see what working's like. So for a little bit.
Yeah.
And so Anthony had a friend who was working at Accenture, and his friend ended up referring him. So that's how he ended up going to Accenture to try the working thing. So we both ended up in IT consulting. And after 3 years of Anthony working at Postal as well, so we were both on the same client site, he wanted to get back to grad school. He was kind of ready. A lot of interesting things were happening in deep learning at the time, like image classification was getting better and better, and convolutional networks were getting better, and generative adversarial networks were also coming out. So a lot of exciting things were happening, and he had been kind of keeping up with all this and wanted to go back to grad school to pursue his PhD.
What year is this?
So this is 2014, 2015. And then 2015, Anthony applies to grad schools and ends up getting into a biomedical engineering program at Duke to get his PhD.
Bum, bum, bum.
And it was a really good program focused on computational neuroscience. He was really excited about it. At the time, we had been dating for a few years, and we decided we'd move to Durham together. So that's kind of how we made it to the Triangle.
Yep.
And so I switched from Accenture DC to Accenture Raleigh. And that's when I started working in the Triangle. So Anthony's doing his PhD thing, and I'm starting, at Accenture, every project that you're on kind of feels like a new job.
Yeah.
So now I'm working as tier 3 lead of this project in RTP. Did that for 6 months, and then there was this new project starting in Raleigh, and they needed a product owner. So I became one of the product owners on that project. So there were 2 product owners. We had a project manager, supervisor, and an Agile coach. So it's 4 of us, and they kind of dropped us into this building in Dorothea Dix campus, if you know it.
I know it well. Yeah.
Do you know the Broughton building?
Yep.
You do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, okay. So
They're
like
not
that,
very nice. That used to be a mental hospital. So
Yeah,
it's like,
yes.
it's not fancy.
it's
I'll just say that.
so it hadn't been occupied for years and years, and they kind of dropped us off there, and they were like, okay, this is where you're going to work. And it felt very much like a startup situation because it was just a tiny team of 4. And they were like, okay, we're completely new to Agile. This is the first time this client is trying the Agile thing. So, let's figure out what all of that is. The product owners, you go to work with the clients and figure out what we need to build. We were replacing a legacy system for kind of receiving benefits in North Carolina. They were like, okay, go figure that out. And we got to this building, and it was kind of scary.
Yeah, you're kind of wondering, has this been checked for asbestos?
Yeah. We had heard rumors it used to be a mental hospital or a mental institution. And so when we would work like late at night, it would get kind of creepy. And when we turned on the water, it was brown. Our PM was like, we're going to fix that. It's okay.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay.
Yeah, bring your own water to work for sure.
And that project was kind of where I picked up, I didn't call it customer discovery at the time, but customer discovery skills. Because
you're a product owner and you have to do your little cards, your stories, right? So
yeah,
story, that's the nice thing about Scrum. It forces you to go talk to a customer to be able to create your stories.
Exactly. So my role was kind of all client facing. And for the first few months, I would just meet with the client and talk to her about the old system and kind of what the problems were, what the pain points were. And that helped us design the new system that we would replace it with.
Was this a super old like mainframe type green screen type thing?
Like press F4 type deal.
Sometimes that's the hardest because it's hard. The customer can't conceive like what that's going to look like in a modern context.
That was one of the biggest challenges because the way they talk about their problems is like, well, then you press F4 and this happens. And then you press F2 and this happens. And when you're designing the new system, you can't just replace those clicks. It has to be a complete overhaul. So
because they've been doing it for 50 years, people hitting F2 and F4.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. And I got to see kind of the team grow. So after we kind of built out the requirements, then we hired the team. So the team quickly grew from 4 to 80 over 2 years. And at the end of it, we were able to implement this software across all 100 counties in North Carolina. And it was just very interesting because the counties are so diverse. Buncombe is very different from Wake. And so having to design a system that works for all the counties was very interesting. Like there are some folks in some counties that have like one person that would manage the system. And in others, it was like 30. So it was just very interesting working in this complex system. And then
one thing that you mentioned, I want to make sure listeners and viewers understand, what the heck is computational neuroscience?
So Anthony's degree is in biomedical engineering. And whenever I say that, I get a lot of confused looks usually.
Yeah, let's start there. I know what that is, but just in case other people don't. Go ahead.
So what he does is he builds computational models of how the brain makes predictions and kind of anticipates reward and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. And that's computational neuroscience. Mm-hmm. Yep. So studying the brain and then trying to replicate it in code and seeing if we can kind of learn from the brain and how it works, which really turns out whenever you talk to someone in this field, we don't know much about how the brain works, which I find just pretty wild. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of stuff we do in the brain is almost like, basically back when medicine was putting leeches on people. A lot of the brain stuff is like pretty, they don't know a ton about it. Maybe Anthony would disagree, but I think, yeah. I don't know what % we know, but most of them will admit we know very little about how a lot of it works. Yeah.
Still very exploratory. It's a very interesting field. If you want to learn more, you should definitely talk to Anthony.
Okay. Yes. All right.
He's the expert.
If we want to do a deep dive into computational neuroscience.
Yeah.
We may need another host for that one because I'm not sure I could hang with him.
You could.
So you're chugging away, you're building, you're helping, you're learning Scrum, and it's kind of like your first Agile, how to do Agile software development. You're a product owner. Did you get a lot of product owners and Scrum Masters have friction? Was there friction with your Scrum Master?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's kind of designed. That's what I don't like about Agile. When we did it at Channel Advisor, we kind of made it one function. Like I couldn't see the benefit of having to. Like in the Scrum Master people I've met, they're all like, no, I'm going to but I am the voice of the customer and I'm going to stop everything in its track. And they're just way too aggressive about it. And it's just chill out.
They're trained to be aggressive. It's part of their role. I think that's why they
love to fail the sprint too. There's all this drama around this sprint failed. Oh God, this is way too dramatic.
There's always, I found we disagreed mostly on prioritization things. But it ended up working out. We worked together pretty well, but definitely some disagreements. But he was very nice.
It teaches you how to, you got to work with some friction. And that happens a lot in startup land for sure. So you're living in Raleigh and working at Accenture. Then what happened?
So at the end of this project, we've deployed released the software across all the states. It went very well. I got a promotion and I bought a house.
Yay.
And that was kind of so in my mind, I kind of achieved what my parents wanted me to achieve, they always said, get a good job where you can just sit in front of a computer and you don't have to do physical labor, and buy a house. And so
when was this? What year?
This was 2018.
2018. Yep. How old were you generally? So you're 25 and you bought a house.
I was 28. 28. It was kind of okay, now what?
It's kind of anticlimactic. Boom, you're 28 and you've hit your goal.
The promotion was kind of this fleeting moment of fulfillment. And then I just felt continuing on that career path wasn't really for me. I think I had bigger dreams. Anthony and I would always talk about kind of what the future would look like in tech. And we thought the future was in machine learning. And where I was, I felt like Anthony was learning so much and I was kind of growing at a much slower rate.
Because at that time, this is interesting. We'll kind of weave the evolution of AI into your story. So at that point, neural networks were this backwater, and you could do little things with them, but they were kind of useless. And then they started to get some momentum. And then DeepMind came on the scene, and they came out with. I remember when they had the robot. I forget the name of it, but it won at Go, the game, the Chinese game Go, and that's when. Well, first of all, you had the one the IBM one went on Jeopardy, but that one was I don't know, that one wasn't as earth shattering. But the thing that was really interesting about when DeepMind had ultimately Google bought DeepMind, but this is around that time when it won at Go, and it beat the Go masters. It was interesting, but they couldn't understand how it got there. That's that caused a lot of ripples out there. That's when Elon Musk was on the board and he was whoa, this is kind of scary. We need to kind of know what this thing is thinking about. Even Go masters couldn't understand. So when you play Go, you tend to start kind of cluster in one of the areas of the board, and it would start putting things kind of way out in the middle of nowhere. And ultimately those things would win. And, but no one knew how it knew to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think they even know today. So, so it was really interesting, as an observer outside the AI world, watching some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But then somewhere, once DeepMind came on, and I think what they did is they started back propagating the networks and they could learn faster. And then that's when ultimately this will get to GPTs through the T part of GPTs, which is the transformation, which is a faster way of back prop. So so AI is cooking right now. It's on the curve.
Yep. Yeah.
And you're helping people with F2 and F4, and he's learning all about. He's on the. Yeah, I can totally feel that.
And so I just felt like I was behind. And I decided to quit my job and go back to grad school as well. And I reached out to my undergrad advisor back at UVA, and she told me about the systems engineering master's program at UVA that was very flexible. It would allow me to get into machine learning and kind of explore my curiosities, because it was very flexible in terms of what courses you would take, kind of as long as you got your research done. And it was fully paid, gave me a stipend. So that was really nice, because at the time, getting a master's paid for was not common.
Yeah.
Like Anthony didn't have that offer for the back when he wanted to go to Columbia. So I was like, oh, this is great.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up going to UVA for the systems engineering master's. And
Did you have to move, or could you do that kind of somewhat remote, or you had to move back to?
So I did relocate to Charlottesville for the master's.
Yeah.
And it was very familiar, because I did my
You'd been there
undergrad
already.
there.
Yeah.
The faculty was very supportive. The community was very supportive. And before that, I kind of had these anxieties about starting over. Like, I had been on a career path and now felt like I was starting over, and there was some anxiety with that. But as soon as I got there, it was such a fulfilling experience, because I'm out of this kind of working at a breakneck pace, and I could focus on new things and think. And I had this kind of academic playground to explore machine learning now. I took computer vision courses with Dr. Vicente Ordonez, who became a mentor for me. And I was very interested in kind of what you can do with images and images combined with text, multimodal. And by the end of my master's, I had worked on kind of a lot of side projects where I would apply what I was learning. And in one of those projects, the Smithsonian had released a bunch of images as a research data set. They were black and white portraits. And I had trained a general adversarial network to add color to those images. So like a black and white image of Amelia Earhart, the model would add color to that in, matter of seconds, where previously artists had to spend 300 to 3,000 hours colorizing a single image, and they kind of worked pixel by pixel. So it was really cool that this model could do that. But then there were all of these kind of human edits that I wanted to do. That wasn't just like add color to this, but let's change the color of her accessories and things like that. So I did that in Photoshop, and that's when I kind of experienced the combination of machine learning and kind of human creativity combined.
Interesting.
And I thought that was very inspiring, and it made me think about how powerful that technology was, but also how inaccessible it was, because someone couldn't just go and do that at the time.
Photoshop befuddles me. I can't grasp it.
Yeah. Photoshop was really hard to use, but also like training a model is not easy for the everyday person. So what if, and I kind of started thinking about what if that type of technology was accessible to the kind of everyday person. We all take images, like great images with the powerful cameras on our phone. But we don't have that many photo editing tools that were easy and powerful. So you have the desktop ones like Photoshop that, were really hard to use. And then there was this trade-off you made when you used photo editing programs on your phone, where you kind of have to accept you have one-tap filters, you have these like kind of simple edits, but you couldn't do more. It was like desktop is where you do the really intricate edits. The phone is where you do like playful one-tap things that didn't give you a lot of creative control. And so that was the point where we started thinking about, well, what if we built something that enabled the everyday person to take the images on their phone and create whatever they wanted as if they were Photoshop experts, but, using software on their phone.
Yeah. I have a bunch of questions. What's a general adversarial network?
So it was a generative model. It's kind of like the early generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't like super smart at the time, but you could train it to do things like colorize an image, kind of specific tasks like translating one set of images that is like kind of has a set of characteristics to match another set of images that had a set of characteristics.
So you would train it on a human colorized image, and then that made it smarter at doing a machine colorized image kind of a thing?
So they didn't have to be, one of the new things was they didn't have to be paired images. So you could have a data set of, black and white images, and then a completely separate set of just, images of in color.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to be, the same image, black and white, the same image colored.
Oh,
that was a cool thing back then.
Yeah. So you started off saying when you went to undergrad, you kind of wanted to do a lot of things. And it feels like this is this kind of really interesting combination of your creative side and your math and science side.
Yeah, I was very excited about that this was a potential path where I would get to explore both sides of what I like to do in kind of down this other career path. So after my master's, my computer vision professor, he always appreciated kind of how I like to apply AI in clever ways. Mm-hmm. And he referred me to work at Adobe as part of their AI team. And so I was interviewing with them to be a product manager, and they were pretty excited about that role, but I would have to move to San Jose. Being close to my family, like right now I'm still driving distance to my family. That was important to me. Anthony was here as well. And so I was kind of asking them, like, is there a way that I could kind of travel for the job, but be based in the Triangle? And they were like, no, that's a deal breaker.
What year was this?
This was 2021.
Oh, wow. So it was post-COVID still, and they still wouldn't allow that. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. They were like, no, like the AI team is very concentrated. We want everyone to be in person. And at the same time, I was also talking to my computer vision professor about this kind of initial version of Bristles, this photo painting tool that would allow people to use this virtual stylus that would let them combine different model outputs without them having to think about it. So it'd be like you take a photo and you can kind of paint on different effects that gave you a lot more control than, say, a one-tap filter would. And you can kind of mix and match a bunch of these effects.
Yeah, and until machine learning and AI, it was very hard for a computer to do image recognition or object recognition.
Yeah.
So if we took a picture of this wall, it couldn't, we're looking at a wall with a little shelf with a vase on it. It couldn't identify the vase. I'm actually, sidebar, I'm familiar with this because in the e-commerce world, you have this problem of you have all these product pictures. And let's say you have a picture of a pair of shoes in your Nike or Under Armour or something. And then if you're Nike, you've taken them with a certain backdrop, but Amazon has a policy that it has to have a white backdrop. So it seems easy, like, okay, I'm going to change the backdrop from, blue to white. But it's very hard because it's not just blue. It's like, you can't just do the little paint fill can thing and drop it on there. So in the e-commerce industry, there's this whole sub-industry of people that will change backgrounds to white, change the foreground to this, do that, rotate something. So it's until this technology came along, this was very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
So part of what not only are you kind of changing that, but you can identify, to your point of changing in your pictures, changing the accessories and the colors. To do that, you have to identify the object. This is an earring, and I'm going to change it from silver to gold kind of a color, kind of a thing, it's a non-trivial problem. So is that still one of these adversarial networks that does that, or is that a different?
The initial version of our Bristles prototype was using the GANs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you could go work for Adobe or start your own company.
Yeah. So that was kind of the two paths. And my computer vision professor also, he actually has a triangle background too, because he got his PhD at UNC.
Yes. Somehow I know him.
Oh, okay. So he always kind of encouraged entrepreneurship too. And he was excited about this idea. It's like, I think you're onto something. You should pursue it. have you considered looking up grants? And so at this point, Anthony and I decided, we are going to do this startup thing. And Anthony's going to finish his PhD, so he'll be, doing it part-time, and I'm going to go and kind of get it rolling and figure out how to do the startup thing. Yeah. And so I was looking up, like, are there grants for businesses in North Carolina? And I stumbled across NC IDEA. So I ended up applying with the initial Bristles idea of this photo painting app. Mm-hmm.
We're still in 2021 at this point. Yeah. Okay.
And the application process was kind of eye-opening too, because it makes you think about certain questions.
It's like the longest form I've ever seen.
It's a pretty long form, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and it's basically, they want to hear your whole business plan, and if you're staring there looking at that and you haven't thought about it, it's kind of daunting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I applied and ended up getting. So there's an interview, or there's like a first round of feedback that you get, and I remember reading the feedback, and I don't know. Do you know John Austin?
I think so. Say more.
So John Austin was a big part of NC IDEA and a big part of entrepreneurship in the Triangle. He started
I'm sure I know.
as part of an accelerator that was out of AU back in the day.
Yeah.
And his feedback was funny. He said, "I've never seen an application where I love so many things and also I hate so many things." And what he liked was that we had built this prototype. I had a demo video in the application, and he was impressed with what we built. But what he hated was that we hadn't talked to any customers. We had done like surveys, and he's like, surveys don't mean anything. And his feedback was really helpful because that encouraged me to go out and, test, show people the product. And at the time, our product was very kind of vague. It didn't have a specific problem we were solving. It was kind of just a better, more control photo editor on your phone.
Yeah. Were you thinking you would go to pro photo type people maybe as a start, or like photographers as kind of a touch-up, kind of premium kind of a customer, or you just didn't know at that point?
At that point, I thought it was going to be for everyone.
Okay.
So it's like everyone is going to use this because Photoshop is so hard. But if it was easy, everyone has ideas that they want to visualize. That's kind of what I was thinking at the time.
It's not crazy because there are some of the top apps in the App Store are photo editors, like Pixelmator. You probably know them better than I do. There's a lot of people that struggle with this, Microsoft Paint and Photoshop. So there's definitely a need in the middle.
Mm-hmm. And so I created this demo video of different things that you could do with the app. And it ranged from taking a photo of, a lake and painting a sunset in the sky, painting in clouds, to kind of painting the leaves on a tree and they can change to different seasons, to a picture of, someone's face and you can add, makeup, earrings, to a photo of a door and painting it in a different color, to a photo of a window and adding a curtain to the window. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the demo video with the different scenarios. And when I showed it to different people, and a lot of the time it was friends or kind of folks I've met in the Triangle, and everyone kind of focused in on the home scenarios where their reaction was just different. With the painting a sunset in the sky, they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't know when or if I would do that. But when it got to the home scenarios, they're like, oh, so I can see what different products would look like in my house. I could test different paint colors in my house. And all of a sudden, it was kind of they had this sparkle in their eye that was different. They kind of talked about how useful it would be rather than how cool it would be. And so I picked up on that, and I was still talking to friends. So it's kind of still biased in terms of customer discovery. So then I stood outside of a Home Goods and just showed it to people, kind of just walking out and asked them what they thought. And
That's a big leap because I'm somewhat of an introvert, and you are too. So like that takes some that takes some guts to kind of like just hi, I'm Tina, and I'd like to get your feedback on this app I've made.
Oh my gosh, it was kind of terrifying.
Yes, it is.
Anthony definitely gave me a pep talk before I went out there.
You've got this. This is where it helps to be in North Carolina. So
everyone's
if you'd done
very
that
nice.
in Boston, you would have hung up your spurs. Yeah,
probably. So I did that at Home Goods and outside of Crate and Barrel at South Point. When I would talk to strangers, they thought it was a really cool concept and also focused on the home decor scenarios. Well, I biased it a little bit, I guess, because I went to the home stores. Yeah. But
you were narrowing your focus and you wanted to get more validation.
Yeah. So we're still in the NC Idea kind of application process for their 10K micro grant, which is their kind of prove out your idea phase grant. Midway through, so before the presentation pitch part of the application, we pivoted from from photo editing to a home improvement visualization tool, and had a much clearer business plan in terms of the customer we were targeting, and we ended up winning a grant.
Yay. One of the 10Ks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this program, I think it's from the Tobacco Settlement Money funds the NC Idea program, if I recall. So there was this litigation against Philip Morris, and all the manufacturers in North Carolina got some dollars, and I believe that's where the corpus of the money comes from. And so Tom Rue and a whole crew of folks there do a great job of managing that. And they have the 10K, kind of like the super early stage kind of, super like, I haven't even put pen to paper yet kind of thing, or code to a compiler. And then they have the 50K. So you got the one of the 10Ks.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I remember John Austin saying, you have a lot of work to do learning about, customer discovery, but you can build a product, and that's the part we can't help you with, but we can help you with customer discovery. So that was kind of my first bit of, okay, I think we're onto something, because folks that know about starting a business believe we can do it.
Yeah.
So GrepBeat reached out to all the micro grantees and did little articles on us, and that's when I met you. So we met up for coffee at Starbucks, and I was telling you about Bristles, and that was kind of the second moment of, someone who is really good at entrepreneurship sees potential in what we're doing. And I think these little bits of, I think it's really powerful when someone believes in you, when you have, you're trying to find evidence that what you're doing is worth pursuing. And so those little bits of, okay, we're onto something, we're really impactful.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur is like one of the most exciting and lonely things. You're kind of constantly like, you're in the desert looking for the oasis, and you're like, am I on the right track? What's going on here?
Yeah. I'm super grateful to have all of these mentors. So Dr. Ordonez was very impactful in kind of making me believe that I'm good at this computer vision thing, because there was when I never saw myself as, good at programming or anything like that. But so it was really helpful to me that he kind of believed in me in that area. And then there was this entrepreneurship side that's completely unproven. And so it was really helpful to be a part of NC Ideas programming and to meet so many mentors like you here that kind of helped me along the way.
Yeah, that's what we're all about in the Triangle. Mm-hmm. The on my side, it's very unusual to find, number one, female entrepreneurs are underrepresented. Just a lot of them don't come through the pipeline, so that was interesting. AI at the time was very novel, Now it's like, not, but like you were super early on that. And I was kind of like, this is and I was starting to follow the GPTs. This is before Chat GPT,
Yes.
but I think we were at GPT 2, and I was starting to kind of like get be pretty curious about that. It was multi-shot and it was complicated, but, and then I know Robbie, who's like deeper in AI, and he like so if I need to go deep, I can just ping him. And then you were solving a problem I knew a fair amount about because of the e-commerce world. So that's that's what was exciting. It's like, wow, this is 3 rare things kind of in one person.
Yeah.
And it's also unusual to find technical female founders. So there's a rarity in that as well.
Kind of the way the timeline of things went, the Triangle Tweener Fund's investment is actually the first money in for Bristles.
After but we were after the idea. The 10K?
So you got
your grant.
We had won the grant, but we hadn't gotten the funds because there's a kind of a process to that as well. Yeah. But yes, so that was kind of the initial funding we had to get started to prove out our idea. And then the fun began with customer discovery.
Yeah, so then now you're in the part of the journey we call product market fit, which is hard. And it's hard to mentor people in this because it's literally go talk to customers, build something, iterate, and you just got to like keep iterating and iterating until you kind of get there. So yeah, this is where the accelerators are kind of interesting because they have a whole program for doing that. And they kind of force you. That's basically what the Y Combinators, at the end of the day, they have other parts like a mentor program and a demo day, but the programming, the classroom part largely is basically forcing you to have a cadence of talking to customers and iterating fast. So yeah, you've had to do that on your own.
Yep.
So that was 2 years ago, and no, I guess longer. So 3 years ago. So you've been in product market fit journey for 3 years. Feels like a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. So how it started was, so we were trying to tackle this problem in home improvement. We had developed a very early version of the product. You can call it an MVP. And at the time you could take an image of your space and take another image of a product, kind of cut it out and recolor it and kind of apply it into your canvas image. We call it the image of your space, your canvas image. It wasn't in an official app. It was kind of in a mobile web app format. And we were trying to solve this problem of how do we enable precision editing on a mobile device? Because we thought about, okay, what are the problems with Photoshop being limited to desktop? Photoshop and other kind of professional photo editing software. And what we kind of landed on was on desktop, you have a very fine precision point because you're editing with a mouse on a screen. And on mobile, your precision point is limited to the width of your fingertip because that's kind of where, that's how you interact with a phone screen. But if we kind of enable this virtual mouse experience on the phone, then we let people do more precise edits. And so at the time, you could kind of interact with machine learning models via this virtual stylus on our MVP. And it was very clunky. And in terms of...
As someone with big fingers, I liked it though, because I could hold the little bottom of the stylus, and then like the little tip is a very precise,
yes.
And then it kind of like shows you exactly where you're going, which is very nice. Whereas the other problem is your finger covers up what you're trying to do. So you're kind of like blind to what's happening underneath. Yeah.
Exactly. So we were very excited about this virtual stylus. So we had this mobile app that wasn't an app. It was a mobile web app. And our first challenge was getting our first customers. So we had talked to kind of people in the DIY space. We had created an Instagram account and gotten some engagement based on showing little demo videos of kind of DIY use cases on our Instagram account. And what we noticed was even early on, we noticed that the furniture use cases got more engagement than kind of the accent walls and things like that. So that was our first clue that there was something interesting there. Then our next challenge was, and NCIDEA pushed us on this, was figuring out if what we were building is useful enough that someone would actually pay for it. Deciding to charge was a very nerve-wracking thing because we felt like our product was, so early, not ready. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that. But now I would advise just start charging and see what happens. It's better to test early. We had this very early payment system off of Shopify where you could buy a subscription, then I would manually go and send you access to our web app.
Yeah.
And we got, quite a few people to pay for it that way. And
what price point did you land on at this point?
We were going for $8, or sorry, at that time it was $14.99 a year. So
okay.
Very low pricing.
So
but
$1.20 something a month. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was too slow, but it gave us, but we were amazed that anybody would pay for it. We're like, oh, someone paid us for this through this weird process. And so we were on to the next phase of customer discovery, which is we know the product is not good enough right now. So we needed to know how to improve it. We didn't know exactly what to do without feedback. So I needed to line up interviews somehow with customers to really understand what their problem was and how they interacted with the product to see where problems were. So I had this idea that we could put a link on our Instagram to a Zoom invitation to do an 40-minute video interview with me. And in exchange, they get the product for free. And at first we were like, is anybody going to do this? It seems like a lot to ask someone to do a video call with a stranger. They get access to this app who they've never heard of, this company they've never heard of. And we got 200 people to sign up for video calls, which was pretty crazy, I thought. And these video interviews were so helpful. With surveys, you can, and, data analytics, you can find things like people are spending time doing this, but you can't figure out if that time is a good experience or a bad experience.
Yeah.
And you don't know why they want your product. And so with these 200 interviews, this very obvious recurring theme kept coming up, which was people wanted to use what we had built for furniture refinishing design. And they were using our app, and what they wanted to do was test different paint colors on furniture, test different hardware on furniture to decide kind of what to do. So with furniture refinishing, you have a piece that's one of one that you want to update. And you have all these anxieties because you don't want to mess up. If you mess up, it's hours or days of rework. And you want to make sure it sells. So you kind of want to have a way to get feedback, either from a client, if you have a client already, or from your furniture refinishing friends to ask, which one do you think will sell better?
So these are not really people doing it for their own use. There's some of that, but these are more like what I would call prosumers, where maybe they did one or two themselves. They really realized they liked doing this and wanted to make a bit of a business from it. I know a couple of these types of folks, they'll kind of go around and find interesting pieces and they'll collect them, usually in a garage or something. Exactly. And then they'll kind of they'll paint them and upgrade them. But some of them will do it custom where they'll have a customer, but otherwise they're trying to understand, what's a good color for this and what direction should I take it? And that's so it's interesting. It is almost like it feels like consumer, but it's like one little tick above. It's not really what I would call SMB, but it's like a prosumer kind of a little.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would hear kind of very similar stories, interview after interview. And it's exactly what you said. They would work out of their garages. So they So they couldn't only work on a few pieces at a time because there's just a space constraint. And they would agonize over these decisions about paint colors and hardware and what would look best. So when they saw our social media videos of how the app worked, and especially use cases where we changed the color of a dresser, changed the hardware, changed the base, things like that, they got really excited. And so that got them to find that link and sign up for an interview. And then, so in this interview, the first part was kind of learning, why did you decide to interview with a stranger? And I would learn about their problem kind of without biasing them in any way. And then the second part of it was, okay, I'm going to demo the app for you, and then I'm going to have you try it on the call with me. And so in the call, I also got live feedback on the user experience, which was so, so helpful. So for example, we had the virtual stylist that I mentioned, but a virtual stylist is not, it's not something a lot of people are used to. And because it extends from your fingertip, we kind of need a little bit of loading time before the effects start at the tip of this, of the virtual stylus. And then, so there was a lot of confusion on what do you do? If you move it around, like nothing's happening. And I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't watch them use the product.
Because in your head, oh, the model's loading. I need to just wait a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you understand how it works.
Right.
The customer's like, what the heck's happening?
Right. So they're like, they're like,
they don't
it's not
care
working.
about the model, like, and you're like, oh, it's cool. It's like doing this thing. And you're like, they don't care.
Yeah. And they're expecting editing to happen at the point they're touching the screen.
Immediately.
So,
they want a paintbrush. Yeah,
exactly.
Like an instant.
And so that's how we learned, okay, let's put a fingerprint at the base. So then it's obvious that you need to you're holding the base of the stylus. And we need to show an animation of the loading so they know something's happening. And that helped us a lot.
So this is good for listeners and viewers. So number one, you've talked to 200 customers, so that's good, right? So you learned pretty quickly. You got to talk to customers or prospects. Number two, a lot of technical people, you don't have this, but a lot of, here's what not to do. A lot of technical people will say, these are the wrong people because they don't understand. That they get so obsessed that their solution is right. They won't bend to the feedback of the customer. I see that a lot. And I get it, but that's not how this works. Those companies tend not to make it out of product market fit because they can't, and sometimes they'll be even arrogant enough to say, they're just dumb. They don't understand how awesome this technology is. And you're like, well, that's not it either. If an awesome technology doesn't matter if no one uses it. Mm-hmm. you may get gratification at that point. It's a hobby. It's not a business. Without customers, it's not going to scale.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things what not to do. But the other thing you've done is the way you've done discovery is you're asking them questions before they've even seen the app, right? Mm-hmm. So you haven't tainted them on anything. And then you're kind of showing them that. For folks new to this, what did you learn about the types of questions to ask, and then maybe what not to do in those discovery calls?
Well, I think it was important to understand the problem before, kind of like what you just said, before showing them your solution, just to hear the pain points, because if they're feeling some sort of pain, they will tell you about it. One thing I think I shouldn't have done was demo the product before having them use it, because in my mind, I'm showing them, look how easy it is. Look at me use it. It's so easy. Yeah. And of course, it's easy for me. Mm-hmm. We know how it works. We developed it. And then that makes it easier for them to pick it up because they've seen kind of the tricks I use to they watched me use it, and now they kind of know better than someone coming in without that demo.
Yeah. Another lesson is sometimes you have this vision that's here as a founder. So yours was renovating a house, right? Mm-hmm. Which would include some furniture stuff. Mm-hmm. But then you've had to kind of go more atomic, right? So a lot of times to get to product market fit, your vision's here and you're not going to lose that vision. But to get there, you have to kind of go more atomic and solve a very specific problem. Mm-hmm. And then, we'll project forward. But if you can solve this furniture problem, and some of the stuff you're learning, there's no reason it wouldn't work with rugs, wall coverings, sinks, countertops. So in a way, you haven't traded off your vision,
Right.
But sometimes to really get product market fit, you have to like start at a very atomic thing and then kind of scale back up. So that's another thing people resist a lot of times. It's like, and it's easy. Traditional venture will tell you they spend all this time talking about TAM. This is one of my bugaboos. Total addressable. I'm sure you've probably gotten this feedback. Total addressable market, blah, blah. So, if you use that lens, then it would be, quote unquote, dumb to go to a smaller,
right.
The home renovation TAM is huge, helping people fit, everyone would say that's not a venture scale business, right? But they don't understand that's part of the journey through product market fit is you've got to shrink the TAM to something you can solve and really drill in on, and then you can walk back up. But, so a lot of times it's very confusing for entrepreneurs, and I don't like that. I've had that myself a lot where I'm just like, The other thing is if you're doing something really awesome, the TAM, you create TAM. A lot of people don't get that either. So Uber's TAM was like 0 until Uber existed.
Yeah, we've definitely gotten that feedback, and I've just pushed through.
Yeah.
Ignored it mostly.
Yeah.
But that is how we think, because the technology we're building generalizes very easily upward once we kind of prove this thing out within the furniture refinishers. So at this point, we have, I would call it like very, very early product market fit. It's not, and I say that because we started with trying to make this photo editing app that's as powerful as Photoshop, but has a lot of utility value and super accessible on your phone and easy to use. And we have solved that specific problem for furniture refinishers. So right now, the customers that love our product, they are the folks that have struggled to use something like Photoshop to visualize furniture refinishing changes and have discovered an easier way. When we first met, you recommended the book Crossing the Chasm. And so I kind of try to look at it that way, that we've kind of solved this super, super early piece of it.
And now one little chasm. Yeah.
So
it's your bowling pin. Yeah.
It's for it's the furniture refinishers that are that have photo editing experience and previous frustrations using really difficult to use software. And now we're
I think it was interesting. One of the things you discovered in your discovery calls is they were using PowerPoint because they understood PowerPoint. So they like tried Photoshop and gave up. And then they're like using PowerPoint to try to do this, which is like, it's I don't know a good analogy, but it's like bringing a hammer to screw a nail or something. It is not an imaging app, but like people kind of understand it, right? It's kind of simple enough, and it's got like foreground, background, and transparency, and just enough to kind of like hack it, but it's not good.
Even bigger than the PowerPoint thing was a more common thing they did, which was to pull up Instagram stories, which I don't know if you've used it, but you can add a photo and there's a little marker tool. And so they would scribble different colors on top of images. And a lot of the time that was their mock-up of different designs when they asked for feedback. So when I saw that, I was immediately thinking we could definitely solve that 10 times better. Yeah.
It's a low bar to jump over. It's crayons and you've got a fancy pen.
Yeah. And, Photoshop exists, but they're doing this. So that was really interesting. And so back to kind of the crossing the chasm chart. I think we're very, very early on the left side, but we've kind of solved the problem for you've struggled with Photoshop and you're a furniture refinisher. And now we're kind of getting the furniture refinishers that haven't ventured into Photoshop, but have heard about us and they're interested. But because they haven't spent hours doing a mock-up on Photoshop, now they come into Bristles and it doesn't feel easy for them. So we've kind of crossed into a different segment now of folks that we need to improve the product for even more. So in our latest customer discovery interviews, now we're hearing the folks that love our product are still spending like 20 minutes mocking up a design. And this is a huge improvement compared to, hours on Photoshop, but 20 minutes is a long time. And so the next thing we're thinking about is how do we reduce that 20 minutes to 2 minutes? And so we're working on Bristles 2.0 now, which...
Spoiler. Ooh, you heard it here first.
And so we're integrating a lot of AI automations in order to make some of the things they're spending time on easier. Like right now, they have to copy individual pieces of hardware. And so we can reduce time by kind of automating it. It's complex behind the scenes, but we're excited about solving that.
Yeah. And even in Bristles 1, you have a generative AI piece. Talk a little bit about that and how you came up with that idea.
Yeah. So we're starting to get some feedback about, like I said, the users that had used Photoshop thought it was easy, but a lot of folks still kind of struggled with with the virtual stylists. They felt like you still needed a lot of dexterity to use it well. And they just didn't have the patience to kind of get from start to mock-up. And that's what they wanted. So one idea was, well, we'll integrate generative AI so you can, come up with designs using a prompt. We'd have an inspo feed where you can generate ideas based on a photo of your piece if you didn't have an idea already. And we had some users that really liked it, and some users say they still don't have enough control because what they really want is to test specific products. So a lot of folks that come into our app, they have specific paint colors that they either have on hand or they want to try. There's kind of hardware they're shopping for, and they want to test out those specific products.
By test, they want to take the piece of furniture, do the upgrades, and then show it to a potential buyer. That's the test.
Or they just see it themselves.
Just want to see it. Okay.
But yeah, both of those.
Sometimes they want to share it downstream and see if it'd be interesting to do A/B. We're going to do some brainstorming here. It'd be interesting to do A/B testing where they could then send to their customer
different options.
Yeah, different options.
Yeah. Something we're thinking about as well is making it a more dynamic experience. So they're not sharing just a photo, but kind of an interactive
builder
document type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A configurator. That's what we used to call it back in the day. Mm-hmm. Very cool. So, and what's interesting is when you started this, GPT-1 was kind of coming, and then now we're heading towards GPT-5. So the underlying AI infrastructure is really supercharging your ability to do things, and sometimes starting early. When that wave comes, it can kind of lift all the boats, which is interesting.
Yeah, we've definitely experienced that. You have to prioritize with if you're a scrappy startup, which we are. And so for a while in the early days, we were thinking about spending resources, training a very specific kind of furniture segmentation model. And we ended up prioritizing working on UI things to integrate AI into our app. And meanwhile, Meta releases Segment Anything, which had we spent time on that segmentation model, would have all that work would have been obsolete when Meta released Segment Anything. So
the lesson there is invest in the part that touches the customer the most. That's the most unique. That's your intellectual property.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then understanding how to translate that to what's underneath the AI capabilities that are available to it at any given time.
And there's a lot of things you can do to stack kind of classic machine learning techniques with everything that's new and coming out.
Yeah. To avoid errors. You don't want the LLM type of a thing will distort the dresser or whatever, make it look like a weird anamorphic thing. That stuff's still very relatively error prone. So imagine you have to make sure there's some middle ground there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bristles 2.0 when is that going to come out?
Q4.
We're in Q4.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to release it iteratively as we develop it, but that's what we are super focused on right now. And it's going well. We have preliminary versions of pieces of it working.
Good. Yeah. So just to recap where you are, you raised a pre-seed round. Yep. We participated in that. And then about how much did you raise in there?
So our pre-seed in total was a little under, $280K, including grants.
Yep. Yeah. And then you have this wonderful thing called revenue. And that is the best non-dilutive kind of thing that you can have. to whatever extent I would give a range of some kind, but it's been fun. You started at zero and now you've got your monthly revenues going.
Yeah.
It's not like, retirement money, but this is how, when you start Atomic, this is kind of how it works.
Yeah. So we scaled from 0 to close to the 200K ARR stage.
Yeah.
And it's keeping us going.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And then, and you're doing that through, very small. So it's these prosumers, and on average, they're paying you like what? You have more of a monthly type of a sub now, right?
Yeah, it's $8 a month currently, or they could pay for annual upfront for $48 a year.
Ooh, that's a big discount.
Yes.
You want to increase that a little bit. Like 20% discount is probably good, but I get you.
Yeah, we might do that with the 2.0 release.
When you're a startup, cash today is worth a lot more than over 12 months. Mm-hmm. What's the mix of monthlies and annuals? Right
now, it's like 40-60, like 30-70 actually, closer to. So mostly monthlies and some annuals.
Yeah.
And we've done some paywall testing to there are little tricks you can do to try to get more to try to get more annuals versus monthlies.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, pricing is very tricky at this level to kind of figure out the freemium and where to put the break and when to. You end up having to do a lot of A/B testing, which can take time. So the other thing that's hard as a small team is you've got this pie chart that's your time, and you can spend infinite time on understanding the go-to-market strategy, understanding the pricing, adding features, talking to customers. So it's a tricky one.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I would definitely say we haven't figured out pricing yet. This is just still our early test of it. One thing that's really interesting is when folks get to the point of they have a mock-up that they're really excited about, they're excited to start the project, and it does, and it's at the time where they would buy materials for these projects. So one thing we're testing down the road is also affiliate sales with those products they would buy. So hardware, paint, tools.
Yeah, this has been I don't know what you put in your form that you submitted to NC Idea, but when we first met, that was like definitely one path you were looking at. So it's neat to kind of come back around to that. It's different than you thought, but yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go two directions. Let's look backwards first. So, you've been at this roughly 3 or 4 years. How, it hasn't been easy. A lot of people, you've gotten a lot of no's. I feel a lot of empathy for that because I've probably had 10 yeses and 300, 400, 500 no's. So I always tell founders that's the setup.
Yeah.
You got to get used to a lot of people saying your TAM is dumb. This is a crazy idea. I would never invest in a consumer company. And you're like, it's not a consumer company. Well, yes, it is. So you've gotten a lot of no's, but you've had some yeses too. So what would you tell founders that are thinking of kind of taking the plunge and they're at day one?
I think there are a lot of ways to fund your startup. There is kind of traditional VC, there's grants, there's accelerator programs. So what we learned is we could do a lot more than we originally thought we could. When we first started out, we thought, we'd have to raise funds to build a dev team and build a marketing team, all of these things that we kind of out of necessity figured out on our own.
Sometimes that can hurt you. Like imagine if your day 10, you had like $2 million. Mm-hmm. You may have figured that out, but it is very hard to have the discipline to not just go spend all that money very quickly. And you really have to have the discipline to kind of wait until you've got something that hopefully Bristles 2 really takes off. And then now you can just really scale it. But you got to kind of, that's what's interesting about the Triangle is we don't have a lot of, our failure rate is lower because we don't start scaling until we've kind of made it through to this repeatable kind of a place. So yeah. Do you guys, I'm kind of recently obsessed with this idea of seed strapping, where we're seeing, this is kind of a generation after you guys. So I kind of draw a line at ChatGPT. So then companies are starting after their where you look at their models and they may not, they want to build big companies and only maybe raise like $3 or $4 million, and that's it, because they're leveraging the co-pilots like the GitHub one and the Cursor and Replit, and there's all this stuff. Are you guys? Do you kind of have that mentality where you think you could get pretty far here, maybe without having to raise a ton, or do you still want to go chase the bigger thing? Like this is kind of more like, let's look towards the future. Where do you see things going?
Yeah, we do have future plans of fundraising, but not right at this moment. I think right now we have definitely utilized these tools coming out. Like Anthony now is full-time at Bristles, and he's able to work on development at a higher level now with these tools. So you still need to know kind of how to advise like a Claude or a ChatGPT to help you write code, but it can be, now it's at the, like he can kind of think about what functions need to stack on top of each other, but then kind of the nitty gritty of it, he can have
it's like an architect and then people doing the spackling. So, he's building out the frame and you're just like filling in the drywall.
So now he's like a team of 3.
Yeah.
and it's just him. Yeah. So in that way, we can do a lot more with a smaller team. So we're able to get to 2.0, for example, on our own. And then from there, we're going to kind of reevaluate.
See how it goes. Yeah. On the prioritization of pricing or more features, my advice always is there's a Jeff Bezosism is like solve customer demand first, always. And then pricing will come along. Like it's so much, I see people, especially people with MBAs, not to pick on them, but because they've taken so many classes on pricing, they want to really nail that before they put a product out. But, imagine you had tried that on day one, your customer base is switched, so it makes sense to go solve the product led growth, what we call PLG, get your PLG going, get your product to really hum and get all this customer engagement. And then that will give you, pricing becomes so much infinitely easier. Because maybe you discover there's 2 tiers, there's the super prosumer, and they have a different type of pricing because they have some features because they already knew Photoshop. And then you have these junior beginner people, and maybe they have a different kind of price. You don't know what you don't know until you get the product really humming. And just kind of having a simple pricing that generates some revenue, creates a little bit of an economic feedback, and that's $200K ARR you didn't have to go raise. So non-dilutive customer capital is always the best.
Yeah.
Because it comes with feedback and, and people using the product. So
Exactly. And so I think we've proven that we're providing value to some customers, and with 2.0, we're excited to kind of move towards this. What we're hoping is it'll be, become a lot stickier because they can get to that magic design moment a lot faster. It's not 20 minutes, it's 2. So right now, because it takes, 10 to 20 minutes, I think a lot of folks drop off before they get to that point.
Can you see it in the data? Or is it more customer conversations?
Conversations is where I'm getting it from.
Yeah. Data's good, but conversations are best.
Yeah. And then I see it in our, the negative reviews we get. They're mostly positive, but we get negative reviews on sometimes the tediousness of the workflow. So it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It supports what I'm hearing from the interviews.
Yeah, I came up with a phrase for this. So a pessimistic way to say what you just said is, you could say, look, I took you from using Photoshop in hours to 20 minutes. Give me a break. What more do you want? But I like that you're taking the more, and I call that, there's a thing with customers that want convenience, and it's zero friction addiction. Once you reduce the customer's friction, then they want more friction reduction, and they become very addicted to that. You can never go back. And then if you can keep getting it down, then they become very addicted to that low friction. Because what's also happening, this is inside of your solution, what's also happening, let's say they dip into Photoshop or they try PowerPoint or Instagram Reels, they're going to be like, whoa, that's going to amplify their dissatisfaction and the inability of those tools to do what Bristles, hopefully 2.0 is doing. So, it's an important sticky part of this that's really interesting. And so it's an interesting psychological thing that I never studied that at all, but like I actually spent a fair amount of time thinking about this because it's kind of like our first principles. Elon's first principles are like gravity and what happens to aluminum when you shoot it to space and stuff. Since you and I deal with consumers, understanding their behavior is the first principle that we have to kind of like interact with. And it's really fascinating to me, like how people behave and why they do things.
Yeah, it's also something that fascinates me and Anthony. So we both, from our consulting backgrounds, built software for businesses, and we're pretty excited to now be at the prosumer level. It's a lot. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's harder. But you learn more because businesses are so rational. They're just like ROI driven.
Yeah,
and they're very easy to get information out of. Consumers, you have to like really kind of read the tea leaves and understand. And then sometimes they'll tell you that, like in a negative review, they will give you that feedback.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we're lucky to have vocal customers.
Yeah, that means they're passionate, right? Like that's a part of persuasion is if you can get the customer to just do something. Like it's hard to do that, right? So people have an entropy of not doing things, and if they get so excited by what you're doing, either way, that they'll use it and give you feedback, or they'll leave you a negative comment. That's actually progress. So that kind of brings me probably to my last question. So I meet a lot of people that get into product market fit and they kind of tap out because it's hard. And every journey takes you don't know the end point, which is also you can. I feel like you can see it coming. It's like this Bristol 2, you kind of like can see the little light in the tunnel.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not a train. Sometimes I've done that and it's the train. But you've been at this 3, maybe 4 years if we kind of stretch it out. Why haven't you given up? Like what keeps Tina going every day? You could always go back to Accenture and make 200-300K or whatever it is. And life would be so much easier.
I find the problem solving aspect of entrepreneurship really fulfilling, and Anthony does as well. And we both, come from working in corporate, and we kind of decided it wasn't for us. I think like boring is too simplistic, but it wasn't fulfilling. We want to be kind of on the cutting edge of problem solving, but we also want to own solving the problem. And so entrepreneurship is a really good path for that. And it's kind of what we want to do. So no matter kind of what's next for us is other startup stuff. If, Bristles will work out, but if it doesn't, we don't plan to go back to corporate.
You're ruined. Yes, this is the tough thing about it. It's very hard to go back into corporate life after having this type of an experience.
It's just very fulfilling. Like I don't want to do anything else.
Say more, like what fulfills you about it?
Well, I get a lot of fulfillment from learning about a problem and then seeing kind of the person's reaction when it's solved. So when I would be in these customer discovery interviews, the 200 that I mentioned, I would see the reaction when they painted the piece of furniture and, saw it change and it was realistic and they were like, whoa, I did that in a minute. And that part of it's really fulfilling. And I also like the challenge I almost like the uncertainty and having to figure out how to solve little pieces. I enjoy breaking down big problems into little bits and solving it bit by bit.
Some people get a lot of anxiety about not knowing where the next paycheck is coming. You've had several times where you're like right on the hairy edge of that. Like how have you're very good at hiding the stress. You've never come to me and been like stressed out. You're always just like calm as water.
Well, I think when I made the decision to go back to grad school, I had already committed I was going to get my master's. So I had saved up some money for kind of that master's program. And so in my mind, because I didn't have to pay that tuition, that was kind of my
So you've got a little bit of a safety net. So you're not totally out there. You're not going to be kicked out of your house or something if you can kind of recover. So Awesome. Well, thanks. So we'll have to have you back in a couple of years to see how Bristles 2.0 goes.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about pricing, because by then I'm sure you'll have a lot of interesting stories. And, I'm excited to watch you solve this atomic problem and then start kind of walking up the stack. I think you'll have the benefit of having done this. So you'll be able to be like Pac-Man chewing through product market fit on each of those things. But also you're going to have this underlying tool set on the technology side that's going to make it easier to kind of go do that stuff. So I feel like you're winding the spring tighter and tighter, and then there's going to be a point where that unleashes. And this is kind of like what it feels like. And then you can really start going very quickly. So we'll have to have you back to hear how that goes.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I think one thing we're really excited about is how this generalizes after we prove it out in furniture. So once we get folks really, really loving our product and we see, that reduction in churn, the increase in retention, then this solution applies to kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and even outside of home, product customization at large. So customizing cars or something like that. So it's a big space.
Yeah. When you're in product market fit, you have nothing but what I would call low class problems, churn, all hard ones. And then when you're through it, then you suddenly have, there's still problems, but they're high class problems. It's oh, wow, we've got this, this very target rich environment. We can go explore where to start. And it's it feels good to have those kinds of problems. So we'll look forward to that day.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in and being generous with your time. And we'll catch up with you in a couple of years.
Sounds good. It was really fun. Thanks
Tina.
for all your support and mentorship.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been fun watching you bust through all the walls. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Scott.
For more Tweener content, check out the Triangle Tweener Times Substack at tweener.substack.com. For more Tweener content, check out tweenertimes.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon on Triangle Tweener Talks.